It was time to start my high school season in this new road to glory, but there was one issue. I was only 5'5". So how would I make it to college, to the NFL? This would be a challenging path for Jake Newman, and yes, Julian Newman and I are related. The only difference is I'm going to actually make it to college, and my senior year began on the kick return team for Prodigy Prep at home against IMG Academy. Also, yes, Prodigy Prep is the school the Newmans created, and I had a chance to make my first catch of the game, but it hit off my head instead. It didn't matter though because our offense was moving, and even though I couldn't see how we got into the end zone, I know it happened. I was on punt return duty, and that's when I noticed we were playing in the middle of a desert in Florida, which really confused me and made me drop the ball. But then I picked it up and also got a decent return out of it. Additionally, I realized I was really bad at playing receiver because I couldn't catch. After this one hit off my elbow, I decided it was time for me to make a change, so I figured out the catch button, but before I could use it, IMG safety made a play on the ball. Midway through the second quarter, I finally did it, actually holding on to it, but since I was only 5'5", my little legs didn't have long enough strides to outrun everybody to the end zone, and I fell short. So I just had to try and block while we scored. After I made my first catch, I was finally able to get into a bit of a rhythm, and I was starting to really rack up the receiving yards, but my top speed just wasn't fast enough. At the end of the half, I watched my team go up 17 points on IMG Academy, and midway through the third quarter, I made my first touchdown grab ever. In the end, we would win our first game, and Steve was a stud quarterback that would feed me the ball. I had played really well, which surprisingly got me some college interest. To start our game against Miami Central, I wanted to return the opening kickoff, but my teammate took it away from me instead, so I just used all my energy on one of our first plays of the game, racking up some early receiving yards. And even though I was only 5'5", Steve was throwing jump balls up to me, and I was able to come down with them. I was becoming better with each snap and elevating the Newman name. The Steve to Jake connection was heating up with catch after catch. We took a 14-point lead early, and with how well we were playing, I felt like this Prodigy Prep team could actually contest for a state championship in Florida. We were literally dominating one of the best teams in the state, and I don't know where Jamie Newman found Steve Marca at and how he got him here, but he was a dog. Well, at least he was until he threw this interception straight to the other team. Miami Central made a decent comeback in the end, but it wouldn't be enough to take us down, and I had the greatest high school game ever, which got me my first scholarship offer. It also drew some SEC interest, but we were back to playing in the desert in the middle of Florida. And it didn't start well with Steve Marca throwing an interception early on. And I was frustrated because I was open on the play. I tried to block the field goal here, but I wasn't able to, and me and Steve were not hooking up well in this game. However, even with this terrible route, I caught a touchdown, and by the fourth quarter, we had taken a 28-point lead on Chaminade Madonna, and the game was not much of a contest. Surprisingly, Power 5 programs were offering me scholarships, and I was excited to show out in week 4 when we traveled to St. Thomas. Trying to make contested catches as a 5'5" receiver was actually going really well for me. I was slowly becoming the top receiver in high school football with big plays like this one, and I found the back of the end zone early on in the game. I was completely toasting the St. Thomas defense time and time again for big play after big play. And I had a chance to get my second touchdown of the game here, but I fell just short of the end zone, so I didn't get credit for the drive. And despite being 7 inches shorter than him, I continued to make number 8 on St. Thomas my little Nobody could guard me, and I was starting to build up more confidence as the season went on. Midway through the second quarter, I thought I made a sick one-handed grab, but it was actually a turnover. In the end, it didn't even matter because this was another blowout and we took down St. Thomas on the road. I couldn't believe Steve threw for over 500 yards, and I love the idea of playing with him in college. I also couldn't believe these schools wanted a 5'5" receiver, but I was in the ESPN top 150, so it made sense. At this point, I was already looking ahead to the high school playoffs, and coach wanted me to run a crosser, but instead, I ran my own route and it worked. So he wasn't very happy at me for not listening, but I was getting good at finding the open space on the field. However, running my own routes wouldn't work forever as Prodigy Prep quarterback Steve Marca didn't have anybody open, so he fumbled it away. At the start of the second quarter, we found ourselves down by 7 points to Edgewater, so we would need to get it going offensively. And maybe I shouldn't have called for the ball here, but Steve threw it to me anyway, so that's on him. With only 2 minutes left in the first half, I finally got us on the board, but our defense gave up a touchdown just 40 seconds later. And by midway through the third quarter, it was not looking good for us. And honestly, I wasn't even playing well, struggling to hold on to the ball on plays like this. But by the end of the third quarter, we were able to get back up 1, and from there, we were able to pull away and win. Once again, I had a dominating stat line, and Nick Saban wanted me really bad.
What do you mean by that?
I wanted to make history as the best 5'5" receiver ever, but for now, my only focus was keeping Prodigy Prep undefeated and taking down Columbus High on the road. However, our first drive ended with a Steve Marca interception when he attempted to force feed me the ball. But after our defense forced an immediate turnover, we had it right back in the red zone, and Steve turned it into an easy 6 with this pass to Gio. As I performed better, the game slowed down for me, and I thought I had an easy touchdown catch, but I was completely wrong, and it looked like this one was going to be a close one. With 40 seconds left in the half, I put us back up 2 possessions, and I almost had another touchdown in the third quarter, but I was apparently an inch short, so then I watched Gio Saria steal this touchdown right out of my hands. It was all good though, because I would get another a couple minutes later. But I still wasn't perfect, missing an easy opportunity to put us up 32 points. And then I tried to hurdle a guy, and it definitely didn't end up going well for me. In the end, I finished with over 300 receiving yards. Wide receiver U, Ohio State, offered me a scholarship. I was now a 5-star recruit, and the playoffs were just 1 game away. Plantation High School traveled to the only desert in Florida to take on Prodigy Prep for our final game of the regular season. And I was still making catches despite being in some tight man coverage. I beautifully created separation on this play to make another catch on our opening drive, but Steve Marcus saw me late in the end zone, which ended up resulting in a costly interception. By the end of the first quarter, it was still a stalemate, so we would need to get our offense rolling. But me and Steve were struggling to hook up, so we weren't moving the ball anywhere. I just assumed the ball wouldn't come my way, and I forgot to turn around. Then it hit off my back. Plantation intercepted it, and this was by far our worst performance yet. We were now losing by 7, and it wasn't getting any better for us. I don't know why I was playing so bad this week, but I was in my own head. Then I decided it was time to wake up. I wanted to keep our undefeated season alive, but after this filthy route to get wide open, Steve Marca didn't hit me over the top, and we turned it over again. I have to say, things were not going well for us, but I did start the third quarter with this touchdown grab to put us within a possession. And by the fourth quarter, we actually had a lead on Plantation. I ran a route that left me wide open, but Steve Marca hit another receiver in stride, and even though I was disappointed that I didn't get the ball, I was happy to see the result of a play, and that was enough to get us the win. The Florida High School playoffs started today, and our first round matchup was against Zephyr Hills High School, and I started the game off getting wide open, but unfortunately, I fell just short of reaching the end zone. So I had to watch Prodigy Prep go up from the sideline, and Steve Marca was threading the needle to feed me the ball throughout the game. I made this big play with the 29-yard catch, but after that, I ended up getting completely railed to the ground. In the second quarter, I made the play of the game, catching this pass and turning on the Jets, which allowed me to go 51 yards to the house and put us up 14. The first half ended with Zephyr Hill's kicker not being able to kick it far enough, but he finally got his team on the board in the third quarter. And all of a sudden, it was a 1-possession game. So I was going to have to step up and make sure that we kept winning. And that's exactly what I did, making catch after catch and showing off despite being only 5'5". Steve Marca completely missed me on this play, and then I watched him throw an interception from the sideline just seconds later. So I had to step up again, outrunning the entire Zephyr Hills defense and making this toe touch grab for the 26-yard touchdown. In the end, we would survive the first round of the playoffs, and I'd like to think it was because of how I played. Every school wanted me at this point, and I was now a top 33 prospect in the nation. But we were taking on IMG in the second round of the Florida High School playoffs, and throwing up a jump ball to a 5'5" wide receiver wasn't Steve's best decision as IMG intercepted it. But we were ready to bounce back and take them down just like we did at the beginning of the year. However, once again, number 8 on IMG was completely locking me up. But it didn't matter because I found the end zone at the start of the third quarter. And then I burnt the IMG defense over the top a few minutes later to score another touchdown and give us a 14-point lead. At the end of the second quarter, I outran them again, but Steve Marca overthrew me, so it didn't matter. However, that play ended up not being a big deal because I was playing so well and I just continued to extend our lead even more. So we were going to move on to the state semifinals, and I even had a tackle in my final stat line. I was going to have to make a college decision soon, but first, we were playing Miami Central in the Florida High School state playoffs, and me and Steve weren't hooking up well throughout this game. But it didn't matter because he was still able to give us an early 7-point lead. Then Miami Central's kicker attempted a kick he would have never made, and by the start of the third quarter, it was still a 1-possession game. But unfortunately, with 2 minutes left, it was tied, and we didn't pick up the first down, so we had to punt it right back to them. But after a fumble, we had 30 seconds and a chance to go down and kick the game-winning field goal. I got my first target of the drive here, getting us really close to a comfortable kicking range, but then Steve Marca choked, throwing a ball straight to the other team. And after, Miami Central scored in overtime. We had to make sure we responded back to stay in the game, and even though I had nothing to do with it, that is exactly what we were able to do. I had to watch as my team kicked a field goal in the second overtime, but our defense got a stop after that, and we fortunately survived. The Florida High School State Championship was at Doak S. Campbell Stadium, and Prodigy Prep was taking on Palm Bay High School. I started the game off by making a simple simple catch for an easy 13 yards, and then our first drive ended with me finding the back of the end zone and giving us the lead. Near the end of the first half, I continued to get us in great positions to score, and I watched as we took a 14-point lead. I could have had a touchdown here, but I didn't turn around and it hit off my back. However, I made up for it with this tough catch. In the end, we played well enough to easily secure a win, and Jake Newman won a state championship for Prodigy Prep. But it was time for signing day, and I wanted to go where Steve Marco went. After winning a high school state championship as a senior, I had to make a college decision. Ohio State's Ryan Day, Alabama's Nick Saban, and LSU's Brian Kelly all wanted me. Those three schools would give me my best chance to make the NFL as a 5'5" wide receiver, and in the end, I decided to commit to Alabama. But I immediately realized I would have to fight to see the field. I wasn't even a top 6 wide receiver on the depth chart, so I would have to impress Nick Saban at practice. And it was going to take a long time to make an impression on the GOAT. I showed off my hands holding onto this ball despite getting absolutely railed, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to do enough in practice this week to move up the depth chart. So I had to watch our week 1 game against Virginia Tech from the sidelines. Even with a 31-point lead, Nick Saban didn't put me in, and I didn't get to play a single snap. So for Nick Saban to give me a chance, I would have to practice perfectly, and it would not be easy with it pouring down hard in Tuscaloosa. It made it so much harder to get a good grip on the ball, and if I continued to struggle to catch, I'm not sure I would ever see the field. But about midway through practice, I made my biggest play yet, taking it all the way down to the 6-yard line. However, the other plays that I had to run continued to cancel out anything good that I did, and I underestimated how hard it would be to get playing time at Alabama. We had a big game at College Station, and once again, Nick Saban made me watch from the sidelines, but at least we won the game, and now I had to go show out during our weekly practice. I was honestly making so many catches this time. Despite being 5'5" and 160 pounds, I was also shedding tackles and showing my abilities after the catch. I felt like this was my breakout practice that would really impress Nick Saban, and this was one of my nastiest routes yet. I created so much separation, but I just wasn't fast enough to make it into the end zone before getting caught. On this play, I put not one, but 2 defenders into a complete spin cycle, and later on I was wide open up the seam, but Bryce Young completely missed me. Even with that inaccurate throw, I gained a lot of the coach's trust, and if I had a good practice this week, Nick Saban promised me I'd move up the depth chart. But I was dropping catches that I really should have held on to, so I would have to finish practice by making a great impression on the coaching staff. And after I used my quick little legs to outrun the practice team defense, I was going to earn my spot higher up on the depth chart. But I'd have to wait a week to challenge for that. Until then, I'd watch my team take down Colorado State at home. But after that game, I was in a position battle to move up the depth chart as a 5'5" wide receiver at Alabama. Unfortunately, with only a few reps left, it was not looking good for me, and after I wasn't able to hold on to the ball while getting obliterated at the same time, I knew I had failed to impress Nick Saban. So of course, it was now our 4th game, and I still hadn't stepped onto the field once, but at least I was going to most likely have a free ride to a national championship. I had another opportunity to show off in front of Nick Saban and move up the depth chart the following week, but I felt like Bryce Young was really holding me back with missed throws like this. However, nobody expected me at 5'5" to go up and win this jump ball, come down with it, and go for another few yards. That play alone made everybody in our indoor facility turn around and pay attention to me, and my confidence levels were through the roof. Then I almost mossed the corner again, but in the end, I wasn't able to hold on to the ball, so on the next practice play, I went out and I caught this short catch. And I was so close to winning the position battle, but then I couldn't get open on the last play of practice, and once again, I failed to move up the depth chart. I was sick, having to watch my team from the sideline for another week without getting in, and the worst part was, it was a cold and rainy day, so all I wanted to do was go home. Once again, I was in a position battle, and they say the 3rd time's the charm, so we'll see if that's actually true in today's practice. With only a few reps left, I could tell that this one was going to come down to the wire, and then I did it. After weeks and weeks of work, it would all finally pay off. I took this slant to the house, and that was all I needed to win, and it felt so good. Well, that was until Nick Saban still didn't put me in for a single snap, so I was seriously considering transferring at the end of the season to somewhere else. I was tired of watching games from the sideline without getting in, and we were struggling to beat Arkansas in overtime. In In the end, we lost our first game, but we bounced back the next week against Tennessee. And if I was ever going to earn any playing time, I would need to get in another position battle. And that's exactly what I was able to do. It was me versus Ja'Cory Brooks battling it out for the next spot up on the depth chart. And I was getting much better throughout the year at creating loads of separation. But I couldn't afford to drop another pass like I did on this one. And I don't know why I struggled to hold on to it sometimes, and other times I would never let it go. But in the end, as long as I did enough to look better to Coach Saban than Ja'Cory Brooks, I'd be good. I think this Moss catch midway through our competition surprised everybody since I was 5'5", and that was all I needed to do to win. But once again, the whole time against LSU, all I did was watch us win from the sideline. And that's when I realized at Alabama, you have to fight forever to get playing time. So now, my goal was to get onto the field before the end of the season, and I was determined to actually make it happen. Coach Saban was starting to get me more involved in practice by having me run jet sweeps, and I felt like I could start to step into a gadget role for the Crimson Tide this way. I earned another position battle the following week, and we went out and won on the road. So now, it was time for me to go out and continue to work my way up the depth chart, and I felt like I was playing well, continuing to find the open space on defense and holding on to it. Then I did almost just enough to earn Nick Saban's trust by taking this pass 35 yards easily all the way to the end zone. I still needed one more catch though, and I was able to get it on the last play, which moved me up the totem pole. I felt like I could finally have my chance to get into the game against an FCS school, but by the third quarter we were up 42 and Nick Saban still hadn't put the backups in. And by the time they were finally in, I still didn't get to go out onto the field. But we were now sitting at the top of our division in the SEC, and we still might make the national championship game. I wanted to be out on the field when we were playing for trophies, and I was getting closer and closer to having that opportunity. I watched some of my teammates go out and perform pretty poorly during practice, while I went out and dominated the defense, showing I was ready to be out there on game day. And once again, I earned another position battle the following week. But first, we had to take down our biggest rivals on the road, and you know I wasn't getting in. We ended up beating the Auburn Tigers by 25. However, there were still 4 undefeated teams ahead of us, and I was so confused how both Michigan State and Ohio State were undefeated. But none of that matters. The only thing I was focused on was moving up to a third string receiver. And I had been trying all year to earn my place on the team and on the field. This was my last opportunity this season to really make an impression on everybody, and Bryce Young was looking my way on almost every snap, which was really nice. I continued to rack up the points near the end of the position battle, but unfortunately, I couldn't get my feet in on the second to last play, so I had one last opportunity to win it, and I was targeted, but I didn't make a play on the ball, so I had failed my goal. However, I was given another chance to move up the depth chart before the SEC championship, and it was not a great start. I was extremely upset at myself for dropping a touchdown on the first play, but I continued to redeem myself throughout the entire practice. Well, until I dropped another easy catch, which made Nick Saban upset, and I think he was disappointed in me because I had 2 bad drops now, but I wanted to prove to him that I was good enough to be out there on the field. I took this catch all the way to the end zone, and then holding on to this one finally got the job done for me. I had won the position battle, and I was now a third string wide receiver for Alabama. The SEC championship was a defensive battle, with it being a 3-0 game in the third quarter, but once again, I still wasn't getting into the game, and I was definitely going to enter the transfer portal at the end of the year. I had worked all season to climb up the depth chart, but I still wasn't getting any opportunities, and I know Alabama's a great team, but not playing one snap, even on the kickoff team, is crazy. Hendon Hooker led Tennessee all the way down the field at the end of the game, so they tied it up with 23 seconds left. I knew I wasn't going to get any playing time in a game this close, especially after this touchdown, but I knew I deserved to be out there helping us win this game. In the end, at 25-25, Bryce Young wasn't able to pick up the first down for us. However, we did kick the game winner from a distance, and I was an SEC champion without ever playing a snap. Ohio State's Travion Henderson won the Heisman, and my season stats were insane. We ended up missing out on the national championship game, and my name was still not on the depth chart, so I didn't care about the result of the Sugar Bowl against number 6 Oklahoma. It was another overtime game, but all I was thinking about was which school I was going to transfer to, because being a third stringer and never seeing the field wasn't worth being at Alabama. And I had 3 options to choose between. I could head to East Lansing, Michigan and play with Steve Murka, my high school quarterback, or I could stay in the SEC and play for the Florida Gators because they need the help. My last option was Colorado, but even with their recent win over Cal, I wasn't very interested, so in the end, I went with my gut and transferred to Michigan State. Last year counted as a redshirt year, so I was just a freshman, and I was coming in as the 5th receiver on the depth chart. Even if I was just on the kickoff team, I was was actually on the field this year, which was really exciting. My goal was to work my way up the depth chart and become a permanent starter by the end of the year, but for now, I was just jumping on guys in the rain until I got to run my first route near the end of the half, which was pretty cool. Believe it or not, standing at 5'5" and being 160 pounds wasn't exactly the best formula for success when it came to making tackles on the kickoff team, but I ended up getting my first collegiate tackle at the end of the third quarter, and Steve Murko won us our first game. If I was going to see the field at Michigan State, I was going to need to prove myself to head coach Mel Tucker, and I'm not going to lie, playing with my high school quarterback made things so much easier as he trusted me to make crazy plays like this one. However, I wasn't perfect as there were multiple times where I couldn't hold on to the ball, and I was not helping myself by calling for it when I wasn't open. Steve Murko and I were not hooking up the same way we did in high school, so we definitely needed to get our connection back to how it used to be. These might have been the ugliest jerseys I'd ever seen, but I wore it proudly just to be out there on the field. I should also mention that we were getting railed by USF at home, so I knew I wasn't going to get into the game as a receiver today. By the fourth quarter, Steve Murko had put up 21 straight points on the Bulls, and it looked like we had a chance to come back, and with 3 minutes left, it was only a one-possession game. But unfortunately, we fell short, and I was focused on moving up the depth chart this week at practice. Despite getting pounded by the defense, I was holding on tight to the ball, and then this cornerback let me, as a 5'5" receiver, expose him and score my first practice touchdown of the year. Unlike last season, I was actually performing really well in our outdoor rain practices, but I didn't appreciate that the defense was trying to decapitate me with hits like this, and I think they began to actually try after I had such a solid start because I didn't perform well in the second half of practice. However, I did enough to earn a bit of Mel Tucker's trust, and I had a good chance of playing this week against an FCS school because they hadn't won a game yet. I have to say, this play you're about to watch is a little embarrassing. Not only did I get pancaked, but then I got up to chase down the returner and I tripped over my own teammate. I was clearly not cut out for being a valuable member of the return team, but that didn't matter because I got into the game as a receiver on the last play of the half, and I ended up making a 27-yard reception. I was slowly becoming the greatest wideout in Michigan State history. Okay, maybe that was a little bit of an exaggeration, but I got the block at the end of the game, and I couldn't have been more excited. I completely ignored the play call and ran my own route, so that didn't make Mel Tucker very happy, but at least I finished the game with 2 catches. And at practice the following week, I continued to perform exceptionally well. The wide receiver screens were perfect for me as I could navigate the defense, gaining easy yards, and Mel Tucker was starting to trust me more. I was living my dream, playing at Notre Dame for the first time ever, and not only did we take an early lead, but I also got a tackle on the returner. However, I did get flattened in the third quarter, so that was a little embarrassing. With 47 seconds left, I watched Steve Murko give us a 4-point lead, and then I came in and contributed to our rivalry win by making another tackle. If I perform well in practice this week, Mel Tucker promised me that I would get a position battle, and I started off with a massive play. But Steve Murko was throwing the ball way behind me, so we needed to hook up more and get our chemistry back. After a couple more catches later in the practice, I felt like with routes like this, I had done enough to earn a position battle next week. And fortunately, that was confirmed, so I had an opportunity to move up the depth chart and earn more playing time. It was me versus tight end Malik Carr, so I felt like I had a pretty good chance at winning, but the rain was causing me to drop the ball on easy catches. And these jet sweeps were not doing me any favors. With only a few reps left, I climbed the ladder, hauling in an incredible catch, and then I held onto another one while getting completely laid out. On the last play, I needed to gain a lot of yards to win the position battle, but I ended up not getting enough. The next week, I had another chance to win a position battle and become the 4th receiver on the team, but being only 5'5" was making it very difficult to create a lot of separation. I could have had a touchdown here, however, I didn't turn around in time and it hit off my helmet, but on the next play, I made up for it, catching pretty much the same pass. I was routing up number 29 and he couldn't hold me, with this touchdown being enough to win the position battle, so I moved up the depth chart and I was finally on the field when we played at Iowa, but unfortunately I dropped my first potential catch. So I was back to being on the kickoff team and getting run over. In the end, we had a 20-point lead in the 4th, but I kept getting pancaked and Mel Tucker had no trust in me. I started off practice with the filthiest juke of all time, making the Spartans defense look silly in the rain, and Steve Murko was looking for me often, so I was starting to really impress everyone on the coaching staff. Well, besides Mel Tucker, because I hadn't really played well in games, but seriously, these routes I were running were filthy as I scored my 3rd touchdown of practice. And I know you're about to type in the comments, run your routes and you might play more, but they aren't always going to get me open, so even if Mel Tucker wasn't very happy with me for not sticking to the plan, it was working. But after a couple missed throws from Steve Murko, I was still far away from earning another position battle. Once again, we were wearing the worst jerseys in the country against Indiana, and I got onto the field in the 2nd quarter. I was even able to make a tackle after we went up 10, but as a 4th string receiver, I still wasn't seeing the field very very much. We ended up blowing a 20-point lead in the fourth quarter, going into overtime, and Indiana would win from there. During that week at practice, everybody was pretty down about the loss, and I used that to my advantage, putting up crazy numbers on the defense. I was getting closer to challenging for the next string, and I finally made a catch for the first time in weeks against Purdue. However, we weren't playing well as a team, down 5 in the fourth quarter, but in the end, we ended up beating the Boilermakers. If I had a good practice this week, Mel Tucker would give me a chance to move up to slot receiver, but I started off slow, failing to hold on to easy catches, and then I took this wide receiver screen for 15 yards, but then I fumbled it away at the end of the play. It kept getting worse with this bad call for the ball that went straight to the defense, and now I was back to zero coach trust. But I did get into the game against Illinois, and I was still struggling to make tackles on the return team. I would literally be right in front of somebody, and I still couldn't pin him down. However, we ended up getting our 6th win of the year on the road, and we still had a chance to win our division. Practice was the most important part of the week because it was how I'd get more playing time, and it felt like I was doing a decent job of performing well. After this catch, I remembered that I could upgrade myself with XP, so that's what I did with this insane boost. We were hosting Michigan, and for some reason we were both wearing white, but that didn't matter because I caught my first collegiate touchdown ever. The colors were really messing with the Michigan defense, and I surprisingly caught another touchdown, making a 42-yard play and boosting my confidence. But unfortunately, I didn't get in at the end of the game, and I watched Steve Marca and our offense lose to Michigan. It was me versus Keon Coleman battling it out for the next spot up on the depth chart as a slot receiver, and despite the rain, I was holding on to everything that I could. I felt like I was doing enough to beat him out, but then I choked, dropping what would have gotten me the position battle win, and then Steve Marca didn't throw me the ball on the last play, so I didn't get to move up. And that was really unmotivating for me. The good news was I still got into the game, and I continued to make the most out of these opportunities, catching this 58-yard touchdown from Steve Marca. And Nebraska couldn't stop me, as I found open space in the cover 2 and outran everybody with ease to the house for a 52-yard play. The amount of separation I was creating was insane, and I couldn't believe I got in for my 3rd touchdown of the day here. Somehow I didn't win player of the game, but I had another opportunity to move up the depth chart and take Keon Coleman's spot. And with how I was playing recently, this should be cake, but in the end, I just couldn't get it done. The good thing was I just continued to get more chances to take his spot, and I could have had a touchdown here, but Steve Marca underthrew me. And it wasn't looking good with only a few reps left, but then everything changed as I made Steve Marca throw up a jump ball and I held on to it. So it all came down to this last play, and Steve Marca waited for me to get into the end zone, threw it up, and at 5'5", I came down with it. So I moved up to slot receiver. And this was my first time getting a lot of wideout playing time in a game. Surprisingly, I wasn't targeted until there were 2 minutes left in the second quarter, but then from there, Steve Marca and I started to connect on a lot more passes like this 35-yard touchdown. However, he threw this dumb pass that I promise I didn't call for, and Northwestern would pick him off. He was throwing a ton of interceptions, so after he threw his 3rd, I had to make him look good again so he could keep his starting job, and taking this 73-yard touchdown to the house untouched would do just that. Then I made this play to get us in field goal range, and we picked up our 8th win of the year. I finally won player of the game, and head coach Mel Tucker was starting to really love me. I was winning jump balls that nobody my size should ever catch, and I wanted to end the year with a win against Minnesota so we could make a good bowl game. By the end of the 3rd quarter, we were able to take a 3-touchdown lead with my beautiful 28-yard route, and it felt good to finally make a difference. Unfortunately, we didn't make the conference championship, but I felt like I had a really solid freshman year, and we were playing our bowl game against number 12 Oklahoma. I'd love to win the Cotton Bowl in my first year as a Spartan, but we were down early, and I could have caught a touchdown pass here, but me and Steve failed to hook up. Fortunately, we got into the end zone before the end of the half, and at the end of the 3rd quarter, I caught my first touchdown of the game on this little slant. But we were down 14 on 4th and 26, so I knew it was over, and we would come up short against Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. But I had found a new home at Michigan State. My freshman year, I battled to move up the depth chart, and now I was a 3rd stringer. With a chance to move up even farther this week, we'd see if I could survive the Big Ten at 5'5", and if my high school quarterback could lead us to a championship. I was starting the season off in a position battle against Keon Coleman, and although I was shorter than everybody else, I was still very shifty. With a few reps left, I was still very far away from moving up the depth chart until I made a move and took this pass to the end zone. But I needed one more catch, and I wasn't able to get it, so I stayed in the slot. I couldn't hold on to the ball on the first play of the season, so Mel Tucker had me blocking on the next play instead. I didn't even get back into the game until the 3rd quarter, and fortunately, by the 4th, I was able to make make my first catch of the season against Arkansas. That allowed me to get a lot more comfortable holding on tight to the balls, and with 4 minutes left in the game, we went up 3 on the Razorbacks. But they were able to take their lead back, so we had a short amount of time to score again, and with 15 seconds left, thankfully, we got into the end zone. So we escaped with a win, and I felt like I performed pretty well. I had another chance to move up the depth chart and become wide receiver 2. From the start, I was exposing everybody, routing them up and then letting them know they couldn't hold me. It didn't matter that I was 5'5" anymore because I was so much faster than everybody else on the field. This final catch was enough for me to seal the position battle win, and I was now wide receiver 2. It was my dream to play at Autzen Stadium, and that's when I knew I had made it. I was starting to get more targets as the second wide receiver, and after this play where I broke a tackle from a massive safety, I was getting confident. With less than a minute left in the first half, I finally had my opportunity, and with a perfect block and my speed, there was nobody touching me on the 61-yard touchdown. I'd follow that up with another breakaway play as well. Steve Marker led me perfectly with this pass, and I was able to make it 44 yards into the end zone. With 48 seconds left in the game, our defense failed to get a stop on 4th and 4 against the Ducks, and we had one more chance to take a last-second lead, but we were not able to get it. So it was time for overtime, and it wasn't going to be easy to beat Oregon on the road, but after our defense got a clutch stop, kicker Jack Stone put the game away, and I knew I was a main reason we won. There wasn't much purpose to practice for me anymore because I was already getting plenty of playing time during game day, but I wanted to eventually become wide receiver 1 and climb up from there, so I kept putting in work. And there were still so many ranks for me to climb. I hope to never see these jerseys again after last year, but we were repping them anyway, and in the end, it doesn't matter. We were just trying to start the year 3-0. On the goal line, Steve Marker threw the ball straight to the other team, so I had to flash back to my special teams days and make a clutch tackle. I honestly wasn't performing well despite playing a weak opponent in Wyoming, and by the 4th quarter, we were surprisingly down by 7. I wasn't on the field for a game-tying touchdown, but I had a chance to help us win, and I was getting into a rhythm, creating loads of separation and getting my Spartans inside the 30. There was nobody on the Wyoming defense that was able to hold me at the end of the game, and this kick would seal the win. Once again, I went over 100 receiving yards, and I was really living out my dream at Michigan State, which felt so good. I was also making people look silly in the rain, which made this my favorite college practice yet. Mel Tucker was starting to love me, and if I played well against Eastern Michigan, I could move up to wide receiver 1, but after I failed to make this catch, I was ticked. At the end of the day, I would completely forget about that mistake because I toasted the Eagles defense and took it all the way to the house for a 77-yard touchdown. That wouldn't be the only time I'd find the back of the end zone either, with this easy 26-yard catch, and then I'd do it again for exactly 26 yards, hauling it in and putting us up 18. I might not survive the Big Ten, but Eastern Michigan was cake, and I even set the school record for receiving touchdowns in a game. Additionally, I even put up an extra touchdown at the end of the game just for bragging rights, and that helped my high school buddy also get in the school record books. I was definitely the player of the game, and I was competing against Trey Mosley for the top spot on the wide receiver depth chart. Even in the rain, I was able to perform at the top of my game, holding onto this ball in double coverage, and then keeping it tucked while getting completely railed. For the first time in my career, I wasn't even worried during my position battle, and this play would move me up to wide receiver 1. So I had finally climbed to the top, and I had to play against number 8 Penn State in the battle of the undefeateds. I started off with a foot race against the Penn State defender, beating him out and reeling in a 40-yard touchdown catch. And me and Steve Marker were hooking up over and over. Our high school connection had transitioned perfectly to college, and I already had 2 touchdowns by the end of the first quarter. By the second half, Steve Marker started to struggle, throwing his 3rd interception of the game, and then Drew Aller put us down by 3. We had a minute left to tie it up, and I made this catch to get us to midfield and give us a good chance. From there, we went on to score a touchdown with 35 seconds left, but somehow Penn State scored, and we lost our first game of the year. My insane performance wasn't enough, so I was back to working on improving my game and chemistry with the team at practice. After last week's loss, I was looking to help us bounce back with a win, but this was possibly the worst start we could have had against Purdue, with Steve Marker turning the ball over and giving the Boilermakers amazing field positioning. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and make an impact with this filthy route on a 33-yard catch, and a clutch 4th down to get the conversion. I figured out how to get around the tough press here, turning a route that couldn't be run into a 15-yard gain, and we got into the end zone a play later. With a few seconds left in the half, I caught the go-ahead touchdown, and in the end, we were able to beat the Boilermakers on the road. I went for 125 receiving yards, and the following week, we hosted Iowa with the chance of improving to 6-1. I was established as our main receiver at this point in the year, and we needed to win out if I wanted any chance of winning the Big Ten and making the playoffs. I felt like it was possible, and after I made the play of the game, breaking a tackle and outrunning the Iowa defense to score a 70-yard touchdown, we were in a good position, and there was no stopping me. Not only did I go for almost 300 yards, but we were only one game back in our division, and I was smashing my season goals being the number 2 receiver in the nation. It was pouring down in Bloomington, and I'm not gonna lie, for a basketball school, Indiana had a pretty sick football stadium, but an atrocious defense. Midway through the third quarter, I caught my second touchdown of the day, and yet Indiana fans were happy being down 24. This was another easy win for my team, and I played out of my mind. It was rivalry week, and I was ready to go into the big house and make a statement showing everybody that the Spartans were better. By midway through the second quarter, Michigan had a 4-point lead, but I was able to put us up by a few points with this catch. However, by the fourth quarter, even though I was playing out of my mind, we were still trailing the Wolverines. After our defense got a clutch stop, I took off, got wide open, and got my team all the way down to inside the Michigan 5-yard line while setting the school season record for receiving yards. From there, we would get into the end zone, but the Wolverines would score another touchdown. So once again, the game was in my hands on 4th and 4, where I took this simple slant 69 yards to the house with nobody coming close to catching me. But all I could do was watch from the sidelines as our defense collapsed in the final seconds. And I tried to run a quick out route to get us in field goal range, but Steve Merker threw it deep instead, and we fell short in the end. I hated seeing JJ McCarthy so happy, and watching all of the Wolverines celebrate killed me, making me desperate for revenge next year. But even if we were out of college football playoff contention, I was now on the Heisman watch list, so my main focus was to win trophies instead. If I was going to win the Heisman, I would need to finish the year with 3 perfect games, and I felt like playing against Northwestern at home was the perfect opportunity because, let's be honest, they really aren't great at football. I mean, I was completely exposing number 2, so even if our defense didn't want to show up today, I knew I'd be able to get us another win. And by the fourth quarter, I thought I was going to get my 3rd touchdown of the day, but I was brought down just short, so I had to run block while we scored instead. I ended up finishing with some nutty stats, and I might make it to the next level before the season ends. Even Scott Frost was doing a better job with Nebraska than whoever the coach is now. I couldn't believe they were 1-9, making this a great opportunity to pad my stats and hopefully win the Heisman Trophy. I couldn't have asked for better throws either from Steve Merka, as he was putting it exactly where I asked him to. Playing with my high school quarterback in college was great, as we ended up breaking loads of records together. I ended up getting into the end zone for the first time of the day on this ridiculously nasty route, but by the third quarter, we were actually struggling to score on Nebraska. It looked like we were going to lose to a 1-9 team until I got open like I always do, taking it 75 yards to the house and solidifying my spot as one of the best in the country. With a minute left, we had a chance to go up on 3rd and goal, but Steve couldn't get it out, so we had to tie it up instead. Then, in overtime, I tried to get open, but it almost resulted in a game-ending pick 6. We ended up only getting 3, and I had to watch from the sidelines as we lost to Nebraska at home. I was so embarrassed. But then, it hit me. I was about to set multiple NCAA records for receiving, so if I had a good day today, I was almost guaranteed to win the Heisman Trophy. But I wasn't playing well for once, with the ball nailing me in the head. However, by midway through the third quarter, I was able to finally get on track, walking into the Minnesota end zone untouched. But then, the unluckiest injury ever happened as I hyperextended my knee on the back of my teammate and bruised my MCL. And that would put me out for the rest of the season. I came so close to breaking multiple NCAA records this year, but I fell just short of winning tons of awards and the Heisman. All I ended up bringing home was the Maxwell, and my team lost our bowl game without me. So I knew next year I'd have to return, break every record, and win every award. I was coming off a season-ending injury, so I could have a rough junior year. However, even at 5'5", NFL scouts were looking at me, which made it more important than ever that I was at the top of my game. Not only did I want to make it to the NFL, but I wanted to win a Big Ten championship, a national championship, and every award I could possibly get. If I played the way I was at the end of last season, I felt like I could achieve all of my goals, and my first game of the year was against number 3 Oregon. I still hadn't made a catch by the end of the first half, until I finally got fed the ball. I broke a tackle and used my top end speed to take it all the way down inside the Oregon 30-yard line, which got us in a position to finish the second quarter up 11. But I can't lie, we started to fall apart in the second half with turnover after turnover, so I needed to bounce back and make sure my team was in a good position to win the game. We ended the quarter going up 7, and a few minutes later, I got absolutely obliterated on this play, which put me out for the rest of the game. Luckily, we ended up beating the Ducks in a close battle, and I wanted to level up throughout the season because that would give me the flexibility to call some plays throughout the year. My team started off down 7 when I traveled to play at Western Michigan, and Steve Merck and I weren't hooking up well today at all. It was honestly shocking how much our chemistry had fallen off, but we finally connected midway through the second quarter, and from there, we would start to really move the ball. I felt like I was getting back into a consistent rhythm, but we were still down by 8. In the third quarter, we failed to tie up the game. However, you could tell there was a massive shift in momentum until Steve Merker tried to hit me in the back of the end zone, and instead he underthrew it, turning it over. And on our next possession, we just weren't on the same page, so once again, he threw another interception. How was I supposed to reach my season goals with us playing like this? It wasn't looking good until I got into the end zone for the first time this season. And even though we didn't get the 2-point conversion, we had the ball with 45 seconds left in the game. And then Steve Merck and I made a much needed play, getting us all the way down to the other side of the field. So I got to watch from the sidelines as our kicker nailed the winner, and we escaped the huge upset. I deserved to be the player of the game, and I was looking to put up a crazy stat line when we hosted Central Michigan. I ended the first quarter by burning the cornerback on my side and finishing the play with a legendary dive. Then I caught another touchdown a few minutes later, and it was clear to me that we were going to cruise to another win. I felt like I had put on a good performance, and I was now considered a veteran starter. We were sitting at number 15 in the polls, but I was far behind in the receiving yards race. This road game at Utah State would not be easy, but I was trying to break multiple school career records, and that would mean that I would need to go for over 150 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. I'd make my first end zone grab at the beginning of the second quarter, and I continued to dominate the Utah State defense while making defenders look silly. Still, I only had 55 receiving yards, but instead of racking up more, I had to make a clutch tackle to stop Utah State from a huge defensive turnaround. And then in the third quarter, after Steve Merka threw an interception, we found ourselves in a tie game until this touchdown. And even though it was clear we would avoid the loss, I didn't end up breaking a single school record. I had my first Big Ten game of the year at Nebraska, and I started the second quarter with a touchdown grab. Steve Merka was a perfect 13 for 13 after he hit me in the end zone, and he was playing on a whole other level today as he kept feeding me the ball. We would end up getting by the Cornhuskers and improving to 5-0. It was clear that we were a run-first team, so my touches were very limited this year. I wanted to give the kids that were watching from the hospital an amazing performance today because I knew they weren't used to seeing a good offense, and if I wanted to actually win the Heisman, I would really need to step up my game. I hadn't had a bad season so far, but I certainly wasn't on pace to match my stats from last year, and the good thing was I already had 2 touchdowns before the end of the first quarter. On one of the last plays of the half, I snuck by the defense for my 3rd score of the day, but surprisingly, it was a very close game. So with less than 2 minutes left, we had to go down the field on the Hawkeyes and figure out how to break the tie. I continued to help us move the ball by finding all the open spots in the defense, which led to us getting into the end zone here and leaving Iowa with another win. I felt like my performance should have gotten me some attention, but I still wasn't getting onto the Heisman watch list. So if I wanted to win any awards this year, I would need to continue to play at the top of my game. And I was off to a hot start against Illinois. But that wouldn't continue as I'd make a bad call for the ball, which led to Steve Merka turning it over. I needed to redeem myself after that, so thankfully, Steve Merka saw me streaking down the field wide open for a 40-yard gain. And then he would find me again on this corner route that would get our team inside the 5-yard line. Even though I kept getting open while making big plays, I was getting tackled short of the end zone every time, and then when I had a chance for touchdowns, I couldn't get it done. So my stats weren't going to be as good, but at least I was being a team player, making blocks that would lead to scores. I was a little jealous of Jordan Wright's touches because he was ruining the chance I had to be great, which was hurting my Heisman odds as well. Hopefully, a tunnel fight wouldn't happen again, but I wasn't promising anything. I wouldn't be opposed to jumping JJ McCarthy if we couldn't pull off this rivalry win, and you could tell there was a lot of hate with deadly hits like this. But that wouldn't stop me from scoring a couple of plays later. It just meant way too much to me to lose to Michigan after last year, so I was doing everything I could to put us on top. And honestly, the Wolverines weren't doing a very good job at stopping me. I was already well over 100 receiving yards just midway through the second quarter, but by the third, we weren't scoring and we found ourselves down by 10. Thankfully, we got within 1 possession, so we weren't completely out of it. And with 3 minutes left, we were able to tie it up. But right after, Michigan went down and scored, so I had to respond back. And that's when I made the miracle play, taking it 75 yards to the house untouched. Again though, our defense stunk, so we needed to get back on the board in less than a minute. And I did it once again, making a huge play for my team and getting into the end zone with just 22 seconds left, which even led to me breaking my own school record. In overtime, if we scored a touchdown on this possession, we would survive, and I made that game-winning catch. There wasn't anything that felt better than this. We took home the rivalry trophy, and I was the only reason that we did. But I still didn't get onto the Heisman watch list, so I needed to go out and dominate the following week on the road. I started off with a touchdown against Northwestern, but that was the only catch I'd make the rest of the half until this play, and that led to us going up by 4. I felt like we should have had a better lead on Northwestern because, let's be honest, since we are ranked as the 4th best team in the country, we need to dominate games like this. And that's where I came into play, making my second touchdown grab of the day, and in the 4th quarter, I fought my hardest to get the ball across the goal line for another score. Once again, I had dominated, and there were only 3 games left in the season. We had to win this one against Minnesota, but Steve Merca started it off by turning the ball over, so I needed to get us back into it. And this touchdown grab would give us a 4-point lead going into the half. Even after making this catch and move on the play, I was having my worst game yet. It was the end of the 3rd quarter, and I had less than 50 receiving yards. So fortunately, I got into the back of the end zone at the start of the 4th, and then I made this catch for my 3rd touchdown. So I somehow finished as the player of the game. There were still 7 undefeated teams left by week 12, and we were tied for our division. This was the best possible start we could have had against number 13 Ohio State, as I took one of our first plays 77 yards around their defense and into the back of the end zone in front of our home crowd. And this was going to be my Heisman performance, as I wasn't dropping the ball. I'm not quite sure how I did it, but somehow I continued to beat their defense over the top, and that led to another 50 receiving yards. By midway through the 3rd quarter, it was a tie game at 10, and after we went down by 7, I had to make sure I took over. It was hard trying to single-handedly carry a team to an undefeated season, but this laser from Steve Merca to me would help us tie up the game. However, with 33 seconds left on 4th down, I failed to make this catch against the Buckeyes, so even though I played one of my best games yet, we lost for the first time this year. And since we weren't playing Penn State at all for some reason, my only goal was to end the season by getting drafted into the NFL. And I felt like if I could go for over 200 yards today, I'd still have a shot at winning the Heisman. I was racking up the receiving yards, getting to almost 100 before the half, but for some reason, I never got the ball after that. So I finished the year with a very average game, and even though I should be happy that we went 11-1, we weren't going to make the college football playoffs, we missed out on the Big Ten championship, and I never even got close to the Heisman. On the bright side, I won the Biletnikoff, and I had to decide if I was going to declare for the draft or come back for my senior year. But before I made that decision, I had to play in the Rose Bowl against Utah. And this was my last chance to shoot up the draft boards if I were to declare early. I set another school record for receptions in a season, but after that, I got locked up for quite a few possessions. And we ended the 1st quarter tied at 0. Unfortunately, I still wasn't able to hold onto the ball in the 2nd, and since I'm only 5'5", I'm not even sure an NFL team would take a chance on me, especially with my team playing this terribly and with me failing to catch my 5th target in a row. However, even if we didn't score on the last play of the half, I got a little of my confidence back with this 32-yard snag. And with us being down by 21 to Utah, at this point, we had nothing to lose. If you thought that meant we'd come back, you're wrong because Steve Merca had some other ideas. The odds of him making the NFL were looking slim, but then I boosted his stats by making this catch and taking it 70 yards to the house, finally getting my team on the board. But in the end, we just weren't able to move the ball enough to win, and I was not happy about it. Even though I finished with a wild stat line, we got completely embarrassed in the Rose Bowl, and that alone made me want to get out of Michigan State immediately. After I failed to win a national championship at Michigan State last year, I had 3 options. I could declare early for the NFL draft, I could stay at Michigan State, or I could transfer to a better program to boost my draft stock. And since Steve Merca graduated last year, I decided to enter the transfer portal. Georgia's Kirby Smart really wanted me, but after Nick Saban offered to bring me back, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to play for him again. And this time, he promised me I'd see the field, but I couldn't believe who my first opponent was, and it was honestly just not a good start for me at Alabama. I think I was just a little shocked that Nick Saban scheduled my former team, and I was not expecting to be down by 28 points to them. They say the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and they might actually be right about that. All of a sudden, I was watching my career unfold and fail in the worst of ways, but then it hit me. If I was the reason that this Alabama offense actually started moving the ball and winning games, my draft stock would skyrocket and I could make the NFL as a 5'5" 5 receiver. I understand 4 drops isn't a great start, but I was ready to work hard at practice. And after building up some chemistry with Jalen Milroe and the rest of my team, I was ready to go out and rail Akron. This play alone showed I could still win the Crimson Tide an SEC championship, a national championship, and a Heisman Trophy, as I took it 80 yards to the house like it was nothing. If you thought my season was over after one loss, you were wrong. In fact, I think I was more motivated than ever to succeed and make it to the NFL. Everything was on the line and failure simply wasn't an option for me as I caught my 3rd touchdown of the game in the 3rd quarter. The craziest part is I wasn't done after that play because I was able to get wide open and catch another touchdown to end the day. The redemption arc was just beginning as we beat a MAC school with ease, which wasn't always the case at Michigan State. It was going to be a slow climb back to the top, but I was going to do everything that I could to get my team to the SEC championship, as I was making toe-touch sideline grabs like I was DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, we should go out and beat Hawaii, so it was no surprise that I was able to get wide open on the Rainbow Warriors and rack up almost 100 receiving yards super early in the game. I was finding all of the open holes in the defense and Jalen Milroe was putting it in them. So by the 3rd quarter, the only thing I still needed was a touchdown grab, which surprisingly wouldn't come as easy as I thought it would. Even though I was practically getting force-fed the ball, my tiny body couldn't take it as I got hurt, so I had to sit out the rest of the game, which meant that I had 189 yards without a touchdown. I was back from injury this week against Ole Miss, and I was ready to get back into a rhythm. However, Jalen Milroe definitely wasn't on target today as he was throwing it inaccurately throughout the entire 1st quarter, so I was on pace to have a worse game than the Michigan State one. Jalen Milroe continued to struggle to complete a pass. However, he did find me in the end zone to end the 1st half, and I tried to make a block to help him score a touchdown of his own in the 3rd quarter. A few minutes later, it was a tie game, so I broke the Ole Miss press and used my top-end speed to get my team all the way down to the 7-yard line, which ended up leading to another touchdown. And then, with the game on the line, I got wide open. Jalen Milroe hit me in stride, and I ran with it for 56 yards to the house to put us up by 2 possessions. So we won the rivalry game, and it was partially because of me. However, I had to focus immediately. Number 2, Texas A&M was going to be hard to beat at home, but I was off to an amazing start with this easy touchdown grab. And that was not the end of my success. With a minute left in the 1st quarter, Jalen Milroe led me perfectly with a beautiful pass, and I ended up fighting my way into the end zone. Whoever number 31 was no longer had a scholarship after this game because I was making him look like a fool over and over. And I legitimately can't think of a time when he stopped me. Midway through the 3rd quarter, I was approaching 200 receiving yards, and this was my breakout game that would make the country remember my name because NFL scouts were definitely watching this top 6 matchup. Surely one of them would take a shot on a 5'5 receiver, but obviously there was still a long season to get through before I'd find out if I could make the NFL. And I was going to make sure that we escaped College game day with a win over number 2 Texas A&M. I wasn't quite sure why Nick Saban was still calling passing plays, but it ended up getting me an Alabama record, and even though we choked our lead and only had 30 seconds left, I made sure that we didn't lose the game in the end with this 50-yard shocker to the Aggies. I was an Alabama legend after that, but I still wasn't on the Heisman watch list, so I was motivated to keep performing on another level than everyone else. And my one-handed catches in the rain had to draw attention. I was slipping and still catching the ball, so I thought I was set to have an amazing game, but all of a sudden I couldn't feel a thing because I got knocked out cold. I'm not quite sure what level of concussion protocol I went through, but I was back out there, so I have a feeling somebody on our medical staff was brought over from the Dolphins. And I guess it was worth it to keep me in the game. Even if after some of my nasty routes I got completely railed by defenders, I survived the entire game and my head only hurt a little bit. At this point in the season, we had a 2-game lead on the rest of the SEC, and I was going to make sure Alabama actually won at Neyland Stadium this time. I already had 2 catches for 45 yards on our first drive, but I wouldn't get targeted again until midway through the 2nd quarter when I burned the Tennessee cornerback for a massive 57-yard gain. I'm not sure what it was with me and making big plays, but you could call me Jamar Chase the way I was able to simply run straight and score a 53-yard touchdown. With a few minutes left, we had a great lead, but then Jalen Milroe threw it straight to the Volunteer defense and they'd end up taking it back to make it a 1-possession game, and he was selling as he couldn't make an accurate throw. With 3 minutes left, he did it again, throwing another interception which also turned into a pick-6, making it 28-28. Then he fumbled it away with 2.5 minutes left, left, so Tennessee took a lead, but their kicker missed the extra point, which gave us a chance to go down the field and score on them. I ended up making the game-winning catch, so once again, we survived because of me. I traveled to Death Valley, and like last week, my goal was to make sure that Alabama actually won this time, and I got us off to a good start by getting wide open for a 32-yard touchdown on the Tigers. But with halftime approaching, it was 10-7, so my goal was to get us into the end zone before the end of the second quarter, and we were able to do so. I felt like my draft stock had to be skyrocketing, but maybe not because I had a bad habit of calling for the ball when I wasn't open. I ended the third quarter with this catch, and that was enough to get us the win along with getting me onto the Heisman watch list. So that motivated me to work even harder throughout the year, and I opened up our game at Mississippi State with a nice catch. But after that, they started pounding me. I don't know why they were railing me so hard, but I couldn't hold on to it, so I made sure to bounce back as soon as I could. However, even though I was doing well by scoring a lot, my team's defense wasn't, so I knew that I would have to step up my game even more than I already had just to keep us in it. And by halftime, I had 3 touchdown catches on the Bulldogs. I continued to dominate in the third quarter, getting my team down to the 1 and watching them run it in. But if you thought I'd stop there, you'd be wrong. My team's defense literally wasn't doing a thing, so I had to continue to make massive plays to keep us in the game. And I had so much relief when this touchdown put us up by 4. We escaped with another win, and I was practically unstoppable. So I was excited to play in the rain against UTSA. It was nice to not face an SEC defense, and I was enjoying the easier path to putting up great stats. Midway through the third quarter, I ended up breaking an Alabama school record for receiving yards in a season on this 61-yard touchdown play, and everything was going how I planned. With another game over 200 yards, I needed to stay on track at Georgia if I wanted to get drafted at the end of the year. So I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that we won. And that meant catching balls with one hand when they were thrown behind me. By the end of the second quarter, we only had a 1-possession lead on the Bulldogs, and then Jalen Milroe threw an interception on the goal line. So all of a sudden, we were in a tie game with Georgia, and by the end of the third quarter, we were losing by 3. Yet somehow, we ended up getting in a good position to win, and I was pumped up because we were now 10-1. And if I could take down Alabama's biggest rivals, I'd probably win the Heisman. Not only did I get my team into the end zone first, but it also set an NCAA record for receiving yards in a season. And I was going to make sure that Auburn fans hated me. Midway through the second quarter, I caught another touchdown, and I was unstoppable today trying to lock my draft stock into the first round and securing the bag with a massive NFL paycheck. To end the third quarter, I put the nail in the coffin as I got wide open down the sideline and took it 64 yards to the house for the remarkable touchdown. So we beat our rivals, and it was behind my 4-touchdown performance. I couldn't believe I was playing against Vanderbilt in the SEC championship, but I'd assume they have a great head coach. However, he couldn't have been too good because he didn't have a game plan to stop me, and I was doing whatever I wanted on offense. But somehow, with a minute left in the first half, we were trailing the Commodores, and I was pulling every route out of my book that I knew, trying to get my team in the end zone. But I failed to make a simple catch, so I was starting to get really frustrated about our situation. Going into the fourth, we were down by 4, and that's when I decided it was time to take over. I got wide open on this corner route and got my team all the way down inside the red zone, but unfortunately, it didn't result in a score. However, with a minute left, we took a 3-point lead, and after our defense got a clutch stop, we became SEC Conference champions. I knew this was practically a freebie since I was at Alabama, but I had contributed a bunch to this, and that meant that I won the Heisman Trophy. Obviously, with these stats, I definitely deserved it, but it was time for my last collegiate game ever, and I was playing in the national championship game against undefeated Syracuse. This remarkable 59-yard touchdown play would put my team up by 10 early on, and I set another NCAA record at the same time. The whole reason I transferred to Alabama was to elevate my career, and I felt like I had done that. Surprisingly, my worst performance of the year was the championship game, but I had achieved everything I ever wanted. And after celebrating the national championship win with my team, I had to get ready for the NFL draft. I was excited to finally be moving on to the NFL, and even though I was only 5'5", I was projected to be a first round pick, so when my name got called on draft night, I was thrilled to find out I was going to be an Indianapolis Colt. I couldn't believe I'd actually made it to the league, and the first thing I did was tour my new team's facilities. One of the initial things I heard was,
"I take great pride in making sure my players are taken care of on and off the field."
So that made this place even better. But I was ready to get into some actual games. Unfortunately, I had to go through practice first, and I did not do good in my first drill of the year, but my coaches were still very supportive. I'm not sure what Frank Wright did with Jeff Saturday, but I was ready to start the preseason, and I had to actually run my routes, which is a foreign thing for me. I'm not gonna lie, I was struggling to adjust to the speed of the NFL, so I got taken out of the game, but I'd get back in and make my first catch later on. However, I can't sit here and act like I was doing well, as this play resulted in a pick six, and by the half, it wasn't looking good for us. Even though I was starting to make a ton of easy catches, I wasn't enjoying playing Madden 23. The camera angles were terrible, and I had to play every snap of every game, so I decided that I was going to do this a different way by simming everything unless I make the Super Bowl. That means this video will feature my entire NFL career, and my rookie season goal was 6 touchdowns. Through 4 games, we were 2-2, and I had already gotten into the end zone 3 times, which made me the 113th best receiver in the league. My first ever upgrade increased my route running, and I was excited to get my team into the playoff picture. I kept getting better throughout the year, and I couldn't believe this was the only way to check my division standings. I ended up making the playoffs as a rookie, and I'm happy to say we beat the Ravens. However, I didn't contribute at all, and the next week against Cincinnati, I only made 1 catch, which is weird considering how good of a rookie year I had. I'm not quite sure why I disappeared in the playoffs, but I was sad that I came 4th in Offensive Rookie of the Year. The Colts ended up drafting a quarterback in the 3rd round, but somehow Jacoby Brissett was back as QB1. I was the 2nd best receiver on the team going into my 2nd year, and my goal was to catch 8 touchdowns this season. Even though I was incredibly fast, by the middle of the year I felt like being 5'5" was limiting me, along with being on a run-heavy offense with a quarterback that certainly wasn't the best. So I was willing to consider finding a new team. It's ridiculous that this is the only way to see records in Madden 23, but we had to win out to make the playoffs, and after we lost at Jacksonville like we always do, I was watching the playoffs from the couch. However, my overall continued to increase, and I smashed my season goal again with these stats. The Bills finally won a Super Bowl, and I stopped myself from changing teams this early into my career. So I went into my 3rd season as a Colt, but I was now the 4th best receiver on the roster. And by mid-season, I hadn't seen the field. We ended up making the playoffs as the number 1 seed, and even though we went 14-3, I still hadn't gotten in for a single play. Our first opponent was the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes knocked us out. Technically, I shouldn't say us since I didn't get to play, and I was so close to requesting a trade because of that, but I saw that I'd be the wide receiver 3 and stayed. Then the Colts drafted Parker Ham to be the starting QB, who got us to 4-3 in his first 7 games. I was up to a 78 overall, and by mid-season, I was on pace to have my best year yet. But as a team, we were a disappointment as we missed the playoffs going 8-9. But I didn't care because I went over 1,000 receiving yards, and I was glad I stayed in Indianapolis. Somehow, the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, and I realized I only had 1 year left as a Colt. I was hoping to get a new contract offer throughout the year, but after we started 1-5, I didn't know if that offer would come. However, then I saw a text from Frank Wright, which unfortunately ended up not being contract related, and resulted in him challenging me to score 3 touchdowns in 1 game. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, and we finished the year 4-13. Even though I was now an 80 overall, my stats regressed from last season, and I never got a new contract offer, so I sat back and watched the playoffs. All of a sudden, I was a free agent, but now it was time to choose a new team, and I decided to play for Mike Tomlin. I was now a Philadelphia Eagle, but to my surprise, Jalen Hurts wasn't the quarterback, which meant it was probably going to be a long year. On the bright side, I was wide receiver 1, but we started the season 2-5, and I knew the playoffs were probably out of reach. I was already 28 years old, so even though I had my best statistical year yet, and I was up to the 69th best receiver on the legacy board, I needed to start making playoff runs, because if the Cowboys can win this much, there's no reason I can't. But then, I realized I was already regressing as a player, and I don't know how because I'm only 29. I had had only been in the NFL for 6 seasons, but the good thing was I hadn't lost any speed and I felt like I could achieve 1,500 receiving yards this year. Unfortunately, we didn't start the season well at all, and I was on pace to have much worse stats. However, I improved my game throughout the year and I put up some very respectable numbers, but I was a part of the worst offense in the league. So we obviously didn't make the playoffs, and I watched Tom Brady get his 8th Super Bowl. I went down to a 78 overall in the offseason, and instead of finding a new team to win with, I decided to stick with the Eagles. It was nice having the opportunity to put up these amazing stats, but then I realized that Jalen Waddle was brought in to replace me, which made me underestimate how I'd perform. Somehow, I finished as the leading receiver on the team, and my career was going just as well as Jalen Waddle's. We ended up actually making the playoffs. However, this could be my last game as an Eagle, and the Bears made sure it was. I only went for 70 receiving yards, and it hurt to know I failed to make a Super Bowl. I was now a free agent again, and after having 3 years in a row over 1,000 receiving yards, I was surprised all of my offers were so bad. I decided to go with the Bills, and not only did the jersey look good on me, but I was excited to play with Josh Allen. I knew he could get me 10 touchdowns, and by mid-season, we were 5-3. We ended up making the playoffs as a 5 seed, but unfortunately I didn't lead the team in receiving. However, I was just excited to win a playoff game because this could be my last shot at a Super Bowl. Sadly, we ended up losing to the Dolphins, and that loss hurt more than ever. At this point, I wanted to bandwagon my way to a Super Bowl, so I went to the team with the highest record last year, and I knew I'd probably barely see the field, but a championship would be worth it. To my surprise, we started out 2-6, and we completely missed the playoffs. I realized I wasted one of my final years for nothing, and that the Browns successfully sold their dignity for a Super Bowl. I had fallen off to a 74 overall, and I'm not saying I'm proud of this decision, but listen, hear me out. I just wanted to sit on the bench while winning a Super Bowl, and we made the playoffs as a 2 seed. The best part was I got better throughout the year, and I went over 1,000 receiving yards again. I was upset we lost in the first round, but then I realized I was so close to hitting 10,000 career yards, so I knew I'd have to play for one more year, and I decided to stay in Cleveland, where we ended up missing the playoffs, but I ended up getting just enough receiving yards, putting me over 10,000 total in my 11-year career. So I was ready to finally call it quits, and I retired from the NFL. That wraps up Jake Newman's career, and looking back, I wish I did more with the Madden part, but I was still newer to YouTube at the time. I had just come back. It's now been over a year since I returned, and I remember at the time I really wanted this 100K plaque. Now you all have crushed that milestone, and I just can't thank you all enough for all the support you've shown. With the football season coming up soon, I'll definitely be getting back into doing more Road to Glories, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to hop on here at the end of the video, give you all a huge thank you, because I don't get to do that as often as I'd like, and you all have legitimately changed my life. It all started with this series. Now I'm sitting here at my own place in Tampa from moving out of Kentucky, and it just blows my mind. But anyways, this football season is going to be great. We're going to have rebuilds, imperialism, Road to Glories, anything that you all can think of, it's coming up. And then of course after that, next summer we can look forward to the new NCAA football game. Keep showing all the support, boys. I will see you all in the next one.